All right, so hello. I am Nico from Thaliondor.
I'm Casey.
Brian.
And this is going to be our first time talking about just Thaliondor as a whole. We're going to do a little bit different kinds of content here on the channel in the future. So this is our first attempt at it. If it sucks, sorry. If it's good, we'll probably do some more of them. So a couple of things that we have on the roster for today. Obviously, I'm head counsel of Thaliondor. Casey is a council member. Brian is an ex-council member, just coming back into the game. When Brian was here, however, the game has shifted now, and let's talk about that. So what do you think coming back? How do you think the game has progressed?
Well, getting into it, there are some similarities I see. Fighters and archers still kind of everyone's go-to.
Yeah.
Still very strong. More clerics than before, and less wizards, I notice. And I know one of the things we kind of chit-chatted about the other night was what we can do to entice more people to play wizards, which was some of the reasons, we came up with testing from yesterday.
Which we'll talk about in a second. We're going to get into what we did yesterday with test day.
But yeah, like there's some name changes for the abilities that I'm going to have to get used to.
Tough skin.
Yeah, tough skin instead of second wind and that sort of thing. So there's been a lot of changes to clerics that I kind of noticed, but I couldn't quite pick up how they were changed. Something about healing totem and throwing heal spells, which is different. Wizards having access to Ultima as a regular thing rather than just exotic is something different. So, which is actually something I completely forgot about when I was testing anything yesterday, which I should have, because I know we talked over it several times about that change.
Yeah.
So, but that's pretty much where I'm at with the state of the game.
Okay. Well, I guess you weren't here for when we had 10 levels.
No, I passed.
So you didn't see. Yeah, you didn't see.
No,
I
think he left about a year before that actually hit.
Yeah. So we had at one point in time when Brian was around, we had 5 levels like we do now. We upgraded from 5 to 10 and had an excessive amount of exotics. I think it was like 46 different exotics at one point in time. We then condensed the game back down to 5. We do more trials now than we did in both previous iterations of the game, and now I think we're like very much approaching the summit of like peak foam fighting, in my opinion. So yesterday we went over a couple of different changes that we wanted to do to the game. So we did test day, our first ever test day, official test day. I know we've tested things in the past before, but we never made like an event out of it.
We've tested events stuff at regular practices before.
Right. But as far as like locking everything down and being like everyone's level 5, everyone gets every ability, everyone's going to be able to try all of this stuff. What we did was we had a whole list of things that we wanted to try. Maybe in the future we won't do that specifically, but we had a whole big list of things to try. We went to the pavilion, we explained that whole list of things. We went out to the field, we fought for a game or two. I think we did 3 rounds of King game, and then we went back up to the pavilion. We talked about everything that we experienced, got a lot of feedback, made slight changes, went back down, did a game of domination, a couple of rounds of that, went back up, talked about it again, went back down, played
We did a little more domination.
I think we did more domination, and then we wound up doing
Just meat grinder
at the end. But so a couple of things that we talked about. We'll just talk about one thing at a time, and then we'll all give our opinion on it. I guess that would be the best way of going about it. So first thing we did was Shatter, right? And Shatter, I think, was a big hit. So what Shatter was is an upgrade to the erosion spell. We're changing it to a gray spell. So you throw a gray spell. If it hits a shield, it does 1 point of damage to the shield. If it hits an armored combatant, it knocks all of their armor to 0. So it breaks all of their armor on their body, regardless of spell placement. But that's essentially what erosion does. Now, what Shatter does is if it hits a
Unarmored.
unarmored combatant in the body, it makes them fragile or glass. So any hit that they take afterwards, any shot, they are killed. So if they get hit in the arm or the leg, they're dead. Obviously, chest shot would kill them anyway, but any limb strike would kill them because they're fragile or glass, or however you want to put that in your head. What do you think about the spell?
I think it's a really good tweak to cleric. Push people to start playing the class. I think it's the least played class in the game, and it gives them something
Over
offensive.
Wizard?
I think it is. I mean,
I would say not over the people who were actually there yesterday, but again, I'm coming back to it. So.
Right.
I'm just gonna say out of like the regular people that play like cleric, there's 2 or 3 that I can think of that regularly play it. I mean, there's a couple people that are trying to level it currently just to level it, but I'd say in terms of like regular players, I'd say the least played character class. I think it's Shatter something that they need.
The ability to also hit a shattered target or fragile target with Shatter again to kill them is very nice. It makes 2 clerics on the same team having Shatter being able to work together in that regard. One can hit them and then break their armor or whatever, or make them fragile, and the other goes in for a kill shot.
Or doing that against a limb target too will kill them.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I think back when I was last here, we talked about giving them a damaging spell like Holy or something like that. I don't know what came of that, while I was gone. But coming back now and seeing them have that offensive ability, and just from all the feedback I got of the people who did play test it yesterday, it was a big hit. So
yeah, I think that Shatter is a great idea. Ripper was the one that brought it up to me, and he was like, I want to do a spell that's does this, turns them to, I think he called it crystallize or something like that, where you are made fragile or whatever. And I was like, well, erosion's kind of the same idea, where it's like breaking all of their armor, shattering their armor, and that's what that Shatter like stuck in my mind.
Yeah, no, we were talking like freeze dry and stuff like that, trying to figure out the right word for
Right,
it.
I think Shatter works out because, like I said, it shatters the shield, it shatters the armor, or it shatters your bones and makes you fragile, right? So like Shatter is cool because obviously if you're wearing if you're unarmored and you get hit with the Shatter spell, you're fragile. But if you're wearing a singular bracer and you get hit in the chest, like boom, your armor is shattered, but you're okay. So you can
It does eat the one,
yeah, you can spend $15 or make a foam bracer for next to nothing and eat Shatter. If Shatter becomes like a problem, it will just entice people to wear armor.
Yeah,
and it
even a
can be the
single piece.
smallest amount of armor to be okay.
Yeah.
Ripper brought up yesterday that it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. So it does, if you hit somebody with it, it's doing something, which feels good, right? Like if you throw a fireball at somebody and they block it with their shield, like, sorry about it, but...
Yeah, even if you block it, you're doing at least 1 point of damage to the shield even.
Right. The only thing, if you block it with a sword or whatever, then you're out of luck.
Lucky?
Yeah, lucky. Yeah. But besides that, I think it's a good spell. I think it stays in the game. Look forward to seeing that in the game next rules
The next
update.
iteration,
Yeah, which we're working on. I'm almost done with the new layout of the rules too. So
I look forward to editing.
yeah, I'm not looking forward to writing it. So anyway, that's Shatter. That's the first thing that we really hammered. The next thing that we did was imbue weapon. So for wizard class, you can tie a string onto a weapon above the hand, right anywhere up here, as long as it's not on the blade itself, but like closer to your hand, somewhere in the cross guard area, or just above your hand on the handle, so that it's easily visible. You could tie a red or a yellow string to that weapon, and then that weapon would change to magical damage, and it would continue to do whatever blue or red damage, but it would do magical damage instead. So it would go through certain kinds of armor.
Red and yellow differentiated between fire
And lightning,
respectively.
right? Yeah. So fire would go through light armor, not heavy, and then lightning would go through heavy armor, not light. But if you walk up with heavy armor and someone has fire on their sword, you're immune if they're hitting you in your armor. So let's talk about that. What do you think?
I mean, I know that it's been talked about a lot of times in the past, doing like, we've had elemental weapons.
As exotics, yeah.
Yes. I think it's not enough, in my opinion, not enough people wear armor for it to like really be a thing, but it is a way to get around physical wards. It might actually make people actually think about what type of ward they're putting on people. I mean, I pulled out my blue and my yellow ward yesterday just in case, because people were going to be playing around with all elemental weapons. So, I mean, you got to think about it when you're rushing down a king, because they're going to almost always have a physical ward. You might want to get the weapon enchanted before you rush the field.
Yep.
From what I noticed, of course, we didn't have too many people playtesting Wizard yesterday, even with the changes we had made. Because when we went over Elemental Weapon and then, later on Absorb as well, we only really got feedback from about 2 people each on each thing. I think it's a nice thing to have for the Wizard, not necessarily because of how useful it is, but its utility. It comes up in certain situations where it's good to have it rather than not.
Right.
Like you said, like physical damage still dominates the game. That's why when you're playing King game, physical ward, or if they're a fighter, they're going to use Endure, a second one, whatever, and they're going to have a cleric nearby. So giving an enticing option for people to play Wizards, even if it's only for specific game types, or specific people are on the field because they're wearing armor, it's still better to have the utility than not have it at all, in my opinion. And like I said, we are trying to entice people to get back into playing Wizard more frequently. Having that option in their toolbox is better than not having it. And it doesn't hurt anything if it's not being used. If it's just not useful to them in a particular match or against particular people because no one's wearing armor, it doesn't hurt them having it. So, but the people who did play test it seemed to have a good opinion about it. They enjoyed it. I know when you came out to that field in your chainmail, we started seeing lightning all the time.
Right.
And I know there are some, because of the way we had it worked, where it endures for the life, it brings up certain weird things like javelins that basically stay live on the field for the entire game.
Right.
Because it could be really chaotic, I guess, if a wizard were to elementally imbue a javelin with fire, and now this fire javelin is just being tossed back and forth between teams constantly.
Yeah.
Whose life is it attached to?
Right.
Yeah, that's going to have to be tweaked.
Well, I'll tell you right now, my opinion is we just don't do ranged weapons with elemental imbuement. So,
I know that came up for wizards or bows
right,
as well.
because somebody was like, well, I want my bow to have lightning on it so I can shoot through
metal armor.
And I was like, as someone who gets shot with arrows consistently, no. So, but I think javelin is the same thing because it still does the ranged 2 points of damage. So if you throw a javelin with fire on it against, like, the only thing that you would want is lightning on it. So, and if that's the case, I say we don't do it. Like, there has to be a trade-off in some capacity. Like I said earlier with the fire weapon, like, yeah, it'd be super nice to, like, enchant your weapon with fire and then go up to somebody like Chad with leather armor on and you can just cut right through it, right? But if someone like me walks up with chainmail on, like, I feel like a king running up killing somebody, you know what I mean? I feel like a god.
It's like, I see that red thing on your sword. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, go ahead. Swing to your heart's content. I will say, again, as someone who was using chainmail yesterday, going up against Newt, and Newt had his like min glaive, like his like hoplite glaive. He had his thing with the lightning on it, and I'm using my 5.5, and he had a board and that, and then he had his blue underneath his board. And I was like, man, like, usually I walk up and I'm like, hey, I'm in my armor, you know what I mean?
You take the hit or two to get in close and then wreck him.
But now he's got this lightning stick, and I'm like, I really don't want to get hit by that. Like, why am I wearing armor in this capacity? But I mean, obviously that was one person to have that one thing, so I had to worry about that one guy.
Well, he is a person to worry about.
Right. But I think I managed to win that fight anyway. But it still took me a second to be like, you know what I mean?
How you're going to deal with it.
Exactly, which I think is cool. I think it's cool to be in that scenario because he could have just been a wizard holding a lightning, and it would have been the same scenario.
Right.
But having it on the weapon, I think, is cool. Like, the cool factor is there.
Yeah.
I think of, like, Dark Souls, like, Flame Blade, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's awesome. But do I think it will come up often? No. Do I think the cool factor's there? Yes. Do I think it changes the game substantially? Because one of the things that, like, I think about a lot is if I ask, that guy over there, like the neighbor over there, hey, you want to phone fight? And he says yes, and I got to explain to him all of these rules of our game. Does adding magic weapon or imbue weapon or whatever we wind up calling it,
It is.
is it?
It's a lot to explain, I guess.
Is it? Well, it isn't though, because it's literally just this sword now does fire damage, and we already have to explain what fire damage is because of a wizard.
Spells, yeah.
So you're already explaining how it works. It's just like instead of them throwing the ball, it's on the sword. And in this scenario, the neighbor's probably not going to have armor.
Right.
So who's going to walk up? It doesn't matter if it's a fire, lightning, blue, red, whatever. If it hits them, it hits them.
Yeah.
Right?
So are we making this a trial thing?
What do you mean?
Lock behind a trial as opposed to...
So what Zach and I were talking about was lowering, putting Spellbook at 2, putting dual casting just naturally into the wizard's kit, and then putting magic weapon at 3.
Gotcha.
I don't throw well, so like I will never use Spellbook, but I would definitely go with fire or lightning on my sword
Well,
as
the
opposed
increase
to...
in spell slots, which I know.
That's the next thing I wanted to talk about, so we'll segue right into that. So another thing we changed, it was a much needed change, adjustment was increasing wizard spell slots, but not for pull. With the blue, now obviously this is a bad example, but with with a single
with
blue,
my practical red here.
yeah, with my just about red, with a blue, wizards had 4 spell slots, and the idea was it was 3, 4, 5, 6 was all of the different weapon types. However, as someone who was testing the wizard class recently, because nobody's been playing it and fighting the way that I fight with it, which might not be the most optimal way of fighting with it, but that's the way I like to fight with it, and because I suck at throwing spells, I would run out of spells very quickly, and then I'm just a nerfed fighter, right?
Yep.
So that's fine. I'm cool with being a nerfed fighter. Like when I play Archer, dual wielding with chakrams, or even with the bow and having the single blue after that, like once I'm out of arrows or chakrams or whatever, I'm expecting that time to come, and I'm like, all right, now I'm just a nerf fighter. I had my fun.
Yeah.
Now it's time for me to just die or whatever. That time, that fun, that period of fun that you have with Archer is much longer than the period of fun with Wizard, right?
So as long as you got a team that's helping you get arrows, yeah.
Yeah, I think that, so the argument I made was if you are the best Archer that's ever walked on the face of the earth, walked out to the game, you load in with 6 arrows, and you hit every shot, headshot, every round, like every shot is a headshot. Before you're out of arrows and have to resort to your blue, you get 6 kills, right? Switch to Wizard, who has more spells than just I kill you, right? Say you're the best, you're the MLB #1 pitcher, and you decide to come out to Thaliondor, and you get your single blue, you get 4 spells. So even if you hit all of your shots and you get headshots with every spell that you have, you only get 4 kills before you have to resort to your sword. And that's not including, that's talking just kills, not talking like, oh, well, I want to use my acid spell, or I want to use my ice spell, or
Your
whatever.
utilities, yeah.
Your utility spell. So it feels bad to run out of spells, especially if you whiff, because then you're just tapped, right? So I proposed up from 4 to 6, so that way it's in line with Archer. Like, obviously, if you don't want to throw 6 fireballs. You don't have to,
Right.
but with the blue you can get 6. Then with that change, I figured dagger should be higher than that, and we'll call it 8. And then no weapon, dual casting,
Whole bag.
you'll get all 10. So all 10 spells that you load in with, you can throw all of them, right? So I think that would be better and more useful for the wizard to be able to like
And then they can be rejuvenated.
rejuvenated for all 10 again if they wanted to. The other change that came alongside with the spell slot increase was that Ultima would be up to 3. So that is a slight nerf to Pole
Spirit,
Wizard,
yeah.
but they can themselves.
They can do it once.
They can do it once, which is
More than enough.
right. Right. If you're using an 8-foot spear and you need to throw an Ultima, you got something else. You got other problems. But this will keep the amount of Ultimas you can use per life with each weapon set the same, while giving a buff to dagger and no weapon dual caster wizard, which I think is cool and fine and good. Did you guys have anything to say about spell slot increases?
Again,
No, I think it's appropriate.
yeah, everyone that I talked to or heard about from it in their feedback yesterday seemed to absolutely enjoy it. I mean, to a degree, it doesn't do anything for people running spellbook, but I mean that's just your option.
So what else did we talk about? We talked about absorb. So Brian, that was your idea. You want to talk about that one?
Sure. So that came about as when we were talking the other night, like you brought to me the attention of wizards need some incentive to be played again because there's so few. And so my thought process was, at least from my previous experience, wizards will tend to, because you know they had fewer slots back then. We were just now changing it.
You're going to teeter out.
But yeah, they would get 3 or 4 shots at best, because obviously you would want to bring some sort of weapon with you, you know, to defend yourself. And then once you were out of those shots, you would just take the death and walk, because at that point you could really do nothing else. Being a nerfed fighter or whatever thing, like as you brought up before, once you run out of spells, not something a lot of people want to do. So they'll just take the death, go grab their balls, respawn. So my thought process is, what will keep them in the fight longer? Getting spell slots back, either from an enemy or even from their teammates. Like, I wanted it to be more utility, so it can be used defensively and offensively. So the idea was, if you're, you know, stuck behind your own line, I don't know, king game, something like that, if you know you're tossing spells over your shield wall or something and you get tapped, you could take mana from your allies who aren't using theirs. That would give you some way of getting it back. And then offensively, if somehow you got behind your enemy's line, you take their mana and you prevent them from using their abilities while restoring your own, which to me was a cool idea. I thought people would like that. The feedback I got, well from the one person, they really enjoyed that ability. It may not have done so well in execution, or at least the way it was played out, I guess.
But yeah, it wasn't tried too much.
It really wasn't, because, and I think one thing is, Daro was using it as a glaive wizard. Back in my time, that wasn't really a thing. If you were playing a wizard, the idea of you being out there with an 8-foot pole was not was unheard of. That's not something we had back then. So that hadn't really crossed in my mind.
Well,
And-
yeah, it was when you were playing.
Yeah.
Like, the weights of those weapons were just so encumbering to try to like wield around.
Yeah, I think at best they got a blue, and we counted a quarter staff, which could have been like a 6-foot as a blue, because you could only do
Blue
you
mana.
could tap it with it. There was no spear using for it, because that was considered a reg and off limits to wizard. So when I was thinking about like that was not in my head. So yeah, in that particular build, yeah, it's not going to do much for you. You're on the front line anyway. But mentally, in my head at least, for the ideas, you know, the reasons I just talked about, those scenarios, it should work well. But at the same time, I didn't want to give them a useless ability, which is why I thought of the alternative if the person doesn't have mana. because first of all, there's no indication for anyone on the field who has mana who doesn't.
Right.
So if you tap, your ally or another person with your hand, and they say, "Hey, no mana," you got nothing. You got close enough to tap him. You didn't spend a spell slot to try to absorb him. You just got nothing. So I mean, sucks to suck, but at least you didn't lose anything in the attempt. So then there was the alternative version to make a spell version which could be stronger, because obviously being able to absorb from a distance is more powerful than having to get up close to touch somebody for it. So I was like, all right, we'll make it a regular spell. It still casts a spell slot. You still have to do the incantation, and then you throw it. If it hits, you get 2, since you had to waste the time in the spell slot to do the spell to begin with.
Yeah.
And then you still had to hit, which goes back to the first point of not a lot of people have great accuracy throwing a ball.
Right.
So it was more risk involved, increase the reward.
Right.
Still goes back to the same point. What if you hit someone who doesn't have mana? So my thought process was give them back the 1 mana they spent to cast the spell, so they're still not out. They didn't lose anything on the attempt.
Just time.
Just time.
And the ball.
Right. Which, I mean, that's any spell.
Right.
If you miss. But of course, if they still whiff with the throw anyway, then they did lose the spell.
Right.
But if it hits someone who didn't have it, they go back, hey, no mana. They get back the 1, they could try again.
I can only imagine the confusion if you hit multiple people with that spell ball.
Just bouncing around with people.
It's like magic flowing out of your eyes and mouth.
So the idea was just to give wizards a reason to stay in combat after 4 or 5 throws at best, and to want to keep going. We just didn't really have enough people to practice it, or at least in different ways of playing a wizard to really get good feedback on it. Because like I said, the way Dara was playing, sure, it's not going to be useful to him. The other person who was doing it, they were just praising its accolades to me all day. So
I think, in my opinion with it so far, I mean, it's not like I used it, but I don't like it as a touch spell against enemies, but being able to absorb ally mana, I think that's good. I think it's a good way to regain your mana, because there's a bunch of people that aren't using or utilizing the mana that they have, and or just not even at that time. Like, I got nothing, you got it. You're not, like, Squid took it from Charlie yesterday, and I thought it was silly, but Charlie wasn't going to use it because you have the clerics and whatnot trying to protect him. I was protecting him, and it gave Squid his mana back. So I think.
To interject real quick, that's another thing I was ignorant on when I actually came up with this whole thing. I didn't realize clerics had rejuvenation to give people back mana. I completely did not know that was a thing.
Not many people have it, so
yeah. So this was really just me looking down through a microscope just at wizard. Everything else cast aside.
Right.
So that's where that came from.
I will say, I think that the idea is cool, but in execution, it's just not as cool as we think of it in our head. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which we will get to when we talk about another thing that I tried yesterday and that did not work out.
Yeah.
Which I guess we can segue right into. Shadow Shot. So we tried Shadow Shot, literal Destiny plug. Shadow Shot in my head works really cool, and for me, and I was telling this to Marcy.
I kept expecting to get shot by it. Nobody did it.
Yeah, for me, Shadow Shot is not for a.
What?
Go ahead. No, say it.
It's a hunter main.
Yeah, right. For me, a hunter main that runs tether 24/7. I would use it as an archer over critical shot because I rely on this. I don't rely on this. Right? So if I can stop you from moving and give me time to do this and throw my bow away, I'm happy, right? Now, for a person who doesn't know what this is and only knows this, right? Like, yeah, why would you...
Like most of our archers.
Like most of our archers, why would you stop someone in their tracks when you could just kill them? Obviously, a lot of people see me as a threat when I'm running down the lane, right? And if I'm using a red, most of the time a critical shot's going to take care of me, right? And a shadow shot wouldn't. It would just stop me in my tracks, unless they managed to hit me in the chest, right? Yeah. Which is another inherent problem of the ability, but we'll talk about that in a second. The other thing about it was, I think that it's not intended for a red, right? It's not intended for a person like me. It's intended for Casey.
It's intended for me.
Yes, it's intended 100% for him.
You in particular.
Critical shot will do 1 point of damage to the shield.
And that's why I expected it, but nobody shot me with it.
Critical shot at 1 point of damage to the shield, right? But shadow shot goes through the shield. Did we even explain that? I don't think we explained what shadow. Okay, I'm sorry.
I think. Oh no, we didn't explain the ability. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so shadow shot is a arrow like critical shot that you call, you shoot it. If it hits the person at all, sword, shield, body,
ass,
wherever, it does damage. So
wherever it hits.
Yeah, if it hits the arm, it takes the arm. If it hits the leg, it takes the leg. If it hits you in the chest, it kills you. But so long as it doesn't hit you in the chest, if it hits your sword, if it hits your shield, hits your anything, you are rooted for a period of time, and you are silenced for a period of time. So
unbreakable roots.
Unbreakable
not
roots.
root as per the spell.
Correct. You are just entangled and frozen so that your legs can't move. You can still defend yourself, but can't cast any magic, and you got to wait the duration of time for the roots to go away. Which therein lies the issue. The arrow does damage, so if it kills you, congratulations, you wasted your ability.
You wasted your mana.
Right, you wasted your mana. So that sucks. Getting hit with it in the shield, most people are not used to effects happening to them through the shield, unless it's acid or something like that, which just breaks the shield.
Yeah.
But very, very seldomly do people get hit in the shield and be like, oh no, my body is affected by a thing. You know what I mean? And then the roots being called roots, but not function like roots of the rooted spell. It's just too much, right? In my head, and because I play Destiny for 2,000 plus hours,
it has a cool factor.
It does have a cool factor. I think that for me, if I see Casey running at me, I'm not going to call critical shot. If I have access to both, I'm not going to call critical shot. I would call shadow shot because I'd rather stop him and then kill him with my sword.
Because he's going to block it.
Right.
That's kind of the whole point.
Right. Do I think it is better than critical shot? No. But do I think it has a place? Yes. Do I think it has a place in our game? No. Not currently. Not the way that it's built yet. I think we need to shelf it, and we are going to shelf it for a while and then see, maybe kick around the idea a little bit more and see how it figures out. A lot of things that I want to add to the game would be simple for a new person to pick up, right? Like, Shatter's a little more complicated, but we talk about glass and fragile a lot in the game because
even domination while we're playing that.
Correct. In domination, if you take any damage while you're standing in the circle, you die. You're fragile, you're glass. So people understand that mentality. Or if you fight goblins, you hit a goblin in the arm, they're dead, right? That's just how the game works. So people understand that fundamentally.
It's referencing something that already exists.
Correct.
Yes.
It's same thing with magic weapon, right? So Shadow Shot references things that exist, but combines them and uses them too much. It's just
silence and roots
and arrows and
it goes through a shield like Siege does.
Right. So it's just a little too weird the way that it is currently. So yeah, Shadow Shot was cool. Didn't really work out. I think Absorb, cool idea. Didn't really work out. But we can put it on the shelf and bring it back later. What else did we try? Piercing Strike. So Piercing Strike, Zach brought directly out of his ass.
Yeah.
And it's literally just a lunge that an archer can do, like a stabbing lunge. And if they hit, it goes through armor. Right? So they call Piercing Strike, they stab, and it goes through armor. The issue that you brought up is one issue that I do want to resolve. But it's hard because... And that issue being that archer gets nothing when they level up. which is true, but
Archery is so good.
what do you give to someone who has it all? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's such a good class. It kills the most people. It's the easiest to kill people with. Well, the when we switched the game from 10 to 5 back, one of the main things that I wanted, and I still want, is people to use this. I want somebody to use a sword, right? So you get all of this powerful stuff on the front end, but then on the back end, when you're out, you have to resort to your sword, right? Which is why we made so many changes to the wizard to nerf the wizard to be like, I wanted the best way to play wizard to be a battle mage. Like, you'd be up in the front fighting people. And just didn't work out.
It's not going to.
I don't think so, because
The biggest problem is that mentality of you want people to, at the end, defer to that. They're not going to. If they wanted to use that, they'd go into a fighter.
I agree with that.
There are people who just, I don't want to have a sword. That's not my aesthetic. I'm a fairy princess who casts spells or something. You know, I shoot arrows from across the field. I don't need a sword. If they get within sword range, I've already up. I deserve to die. That's your mentality, because you like swords, and I get it. You know me, I get it. But you have to understand that most, or a good amount of people at least, are not going to feel that way.
Yep.
So having the mentality that the archer should fall back onto a sword, the wizard should fall back to a blue, cleric should fall back to their melee, that shouldn't have to hold true.
I
Because
think the
people
fact
don't
that
want to.
it doesn't hold true is the reason why we have so many people. Like, the fact that they can just go out there and throw their skull balls and not use the sword is the reason why we definitely have some of the players that we have.
It's true. It's true. Which is why we're changing stuff to make it better. But
And that was my big thought process when we were talking about the other night, is people are going to want to do what they want to do, and what can we do to keep them on the field longer? With Archer, I'm not worried about them running out of arrows. For the most part, because archers are already so good, there's usually at least one on per side. If they're shooting back and forth, they're picking up and using each other's arrows. Unless it goes way off the field or something like that, then you're just fine. And I've never heard an archer complain like, oh, I've had my 6th shot, now I can't do anything. I've never heard that.
right.
But
No, they're just calling out for their teammates to bring
yeah,
their
and the
arrows
teammates are
them.
going to do it because archers are so good, give them their ammo.
Right.
But you don't see your team going to pick up your wizard spells and tossing it back to them. Like, it may happen
Very true.
occasionally,
Almost
but in the
never.
middle of a fight, no. That. But if you
That
see,
should happen. That's something that we need to drill into our people. Like,
but if you see 2 or 3 arrows there, and there's a shield fighter encroaching up, your archers behind you, they're moving up to cover those arrows to pick them up and toss them behind.
I do
I
that.
guarantee you. So, Archer being so good, I'm not worried about them having to fall back on that, because they likely aren't going to.
I wouldn't say it keeps me up at night, but like, I do think about how to give archers anything, but because they have critical shot and critical shot is so good, like, what do you do in lieu of that, right? What do you do to compete with it?
What do you give the guy that has it all already?
Yeah, literally.
What gift do you get Batman?
Nothing. A
No.
cup.
His parents bet.
Damn.
Good luck.
So yeah, we tested out those 2 archer things. We didn't test out a thing for a fighter.
Nope.
I wanted to test out. I'm a fighter man. I don't know if you do that.
I was surprised at our list and it wasn't on there. I was like, wow, nothing for fighters. I'm still playing fighter today.
Yeah. That's kind of like a good enough reason.
Yeah.
When, if you feel like class is at a good point where it doesn't need any changes, don't try to change it.
Think that fighter needs anything. I think the fighter works great. To be honest with you, I think cleric worked great, but shatter was just too good of an idea to not implement.
The real test is going to be to see how it works in games where it's not a test day, where you have the variations, people are playing what they normally play, and how it affects normal gameplay. Because it's going to have, like, you're going to see how well people enjoy it, how well it affects the game on a test day, because everyone's level 5, everyone has access to all abilities, yada yada. But that's not a real reflection of how it's going to affect the game in normal practice.
I mean,
So-
shatter, though, it's going to be a level 1 skill.
Yeah. So people are going to use that often.
Right.
The enchant weapon, not so much. And like we said earlier, I don't think enchant weapon happens as often as Shatter will, not by a long shot.
Not at all.
Because people aren't going to need it unless they're fighting against a ton of different physical wards or people in armor.
Or you're gonna have
I know
people
that
who
this
just want
elemental weapon is going to have to make us think about what we're going to do with like NPCs and monsters and
monsters,
stuff.
yeah.
I'm fine with that. Yeah, that's everything that was on here.
Who would
This
do
might
for the
change
next
this.
event day?
I want to do the weekend before. That's a really good point. I want to do the weekend before Frostbane. So Frostbane's on 25th through the 28th. I'm thinking we'll do the 21st will be our quest day. We're gonna pick our new mentors that day too. So we'll have new people apply for mentorship.
Not that I think anybody else is level 5. Try to get to level 5.
Yeah, you got 3 weeks to get to level 5.
You can do it.
You can, yeah, no, you can. No, you can. You can if you wanted to. We pick new mentors then. We're probably gonna roll out Shatter and Imbue Weapon and the spell slot changes this week. So that was our first podcast. I guess that's it, right? Like we're not gonna talk about anything else.
I don't really have anything.
Yeah. So we'll.
Our battery's dying.
Yeah, battery. Well, we have more batteries, but camera's overheating. We're kind of tapped on stuff to talk about, so we'll post this video, see how it does. I'm gonna dread editing all of it, but we'll get it done.
Full version on Patreon.
Full version on Patreon. A Patreon change is coming soon. I'd like to try to do these maybe every other week, is what I'm thinking. Something like that, every other week. It doesn't have to have all of us in it or whatever. Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe every other week or maybe at least once a month we'll have a video similar to this happening. But that's it. So see you next time. Farewell. Goodbye.
Bye.